Um, Welcome. This is a Thursday evening workshop, advanced workshop, we call it. You could think of it as intermediate advanced, something beyond the newcomer's workshop in which we go through the basics of posture, breath, attention, walking meditation, etc., all in an hour and a half. But it's a big dose. It's a lot of information to try to absorb. We did this last night, and Cosette's Randy Earls, our guest resident priest in training here, and he was there to observe and pick up the approach. And he made a point in follow-up discussion that this was a lot to absorb. We don't expect anybody to absorb it all in one session, so we invite you to come back to Wednesday nights or come Wednesday and then come to Thursday to get a little more detail. This is the first Thursday of the month in which we go into posture, so we'll be talking about posture tonight. So the posture consists of what is called the foundation, which is the position of the legs. The most important part is the upright back, neck, and head. We tend to sit in a cashew shape, like a C shape, driving our cars, sitting at the desk, at work. And the natural posture is pretty much the opposite of that. That is, back in the tribal days, people sat around the campfire. If you were hunting, you had to sit upright, still, alert, quiet, for long periods of time, or you would spook the prey. No dinner tonight. So we think that what we're practicing as posture in Zazen, handed down 2,500 years and clearly preceding Buddha by thousands and thousands of years, as a form of just sitting around the campfire and so on. But also, somebody discovered that if you sat still enough for long enough, something started happening. Things started changing. And so in Buddhist time, pre-Buddhism, Hinduism, the Vedic teachings and so forth, they had yogic meditation, they had yoga, they had all kinds of sects and schools at the time, belief systems, creation myths and so forth, just as we have today all over the world. So when Buddha sat down that night 2,500 years ago, he had been trained, very thoroughly trained in meditation. But what he did, we think, transcended meditation. Meditation is a subject meditating upon an object. That's the way it's technically defined. In Zazen, what happens is we go beyond the bifurcation of self and other, or subject and object, mind and its subject, to something Matsuoka described as, he said, when posture, breath, and attention all come together in a unified way, that is the real Zazen. So saying that's the real Zazen immediately connotes that there can be the unreal Zazen. Or if this is the right Zazen, there can be the wrong Zazen, and so forth. So these ideas of comparison, contrast, etc., analysis get confused in our mind, and they can become an interference in just simply sitting. So what we try to do in our talking about this is to clarify kind of the do's and don'ts of meditation, you might say. What do we actually do? What do we not do? Uh, and often it's easier to talk about what Zen in particular and Zazen, its method, is not than what it is. So Dogen even says this in Fukan Zazengi. He says, lean neither to the left nor to the right, nor to the front, nor to the back. He doesn't tell you what to do. But what's left? If you lean neither to the left or the right, what's left, right? In the middle somewhere. So with that, let's begin to see if anybody has a particular question about posture that they would like to ask at this point, or problem you're having with your posture, anything like that.
Oh, we were reading on that and it said it should be slightly painful. It's kind of gone away for me.
The pressure point Naka was telling his students, said you should push hard enough that you'll feel a little pain there. So they apparently have the curved back syndrome even in those days, right? And the reason it registers as pain is the large vertebra there, the cushions between, they're very large, and they tend to be bending the other way, or stretched the other way. So when you push them forward, you're stretching the front part of it, and you're putting compression on the back part, and that probably is what is sending a signal to the brain saying, "Wait a minute, this is different." And so we interpret it as pain. One of the theories in Zen attitude adjustment is that pain is an interpretation. Buddha was said to have taught that you only imagine that your legs are in pain. And I say pretty strong imagination, right? But so we go beyond our comfort zone. We say it should be the comfortable way. This is not macho Zen. This is not an endurance contest. It's not an ordeal that you should put yourself through, like flagellating the body and starving yourself to death, as Buddha had been doing up until that point. But it should be comfortable. The posture should feel more like a stretch. The breath should be more like a sigh than a belabored effort. So, but in getting to the upright posture, we think that because of our poor posture, in most cases, um, we probably need to go beyond our comfort zone a little bit, where we bear a little more pain than we're comfortable with. And the way Matsuoka Roshi explained, he says, just the stretching of the tendons. The body is adapting. If you remember growing up, you may have had what my mother called growing pains, like my knees would ache. We talked about this in Doferson. And sometimes your elbows, would ache. And they call it growing pains back in the day because they assume that the growth of the bones is stretching everything else out of whack, right? And it registers as pain, but it's just stretching and growing. So once the pain has gone away, that is, once you no longer feel the pain, your body has now adapted. And so it's the lower the vertebra that connects to the coccyx tailbone is now in the right position, probably more correct than what was before. Where it is, if you bow down like this, or just go down forward and hold that pose for a minute, feel your pelvis, the muscles in the back of your back stretching with strength and so forth, stretching out and becoming comfortable with this position. And you hold your pelvis there, and instead of rolling back or rocking back to sit up, sort of arch your back and pull back on your chin, curve up like a cobra rising off the floor. So you're coming up there and you feel that S curve very strong. So that part of the posture is not relaxing. It's likened to the mast of a ship where all the sails are hanging around it. And the mast of the ship is your spine, bearing all the weight. And at first, it should be uncomfortable, probably just given our usual posture. But eventually, that rigorous upright posture, like a cobra ready to strike or a lion ready to pounce, is what allows everything else to relax. The nervous system relaxes, the breathing slows down, the heartbeat slows down. Everything is coming into alignment with gravity. And it's the most efficient posture because the spine is designed to hold the weight that way. If you're a little bit off like this, you're putting strain on this part of your spine. If you're over this way, it's on this part of your spine. The right in the middle is where you become balanced, physical samadhi. I was sitting in Okamura's place one night, and this was Antaiji style retreat where he came from in Japan, Uchiyama's place. He called it no frills, no toys, no BS, basically. You're just sitting. You sit for 50-minute periods, 10 minutes walking, from 5 in the morning to 9 at night. And when you eat, you're still sitting in Zazen. You set out tables and you sit in Zazen. So you're sitting for 17 hours a day. And so it was around 9, getting close to 9 at the end. I'm sitting there, and I've told this story, so if you've heard it before. And I lean over and I hear, drrrr. I lean the other, drrrr. Lean forward, drrrr. Lean back, drrrr. In the middle, there was no sound. I had about an inch sway where there would be no sound. But as soon as I got outside that zone, you start hearing sound. And what I think it is the motor muscles, the muscles of the spine kicking in. You hear them stretching, and so they start like turning a motor. Very, very quiet. So right in the middle is where you want to be in alignment with gravity. Also, Walker looked at that if you were piggy banking, dropped a coin through your head, it would go straight through you to the center of the earth. Like a metal filing on a magnet, you're looking for that sweet spot in the middle of the posture where everything comes into balance, equilibrium, equipoise. It doesn't happen right away. So Sensei said, work your way through every bone in your body. There are 200 or 300 bones in our body, something like that. So you may be a little bit off one place here or there, and one knee, the other knee, or if you have any resistance in your legs, if you're half lotus, crossing your leg up, the one on top is usually the one that starts resisting. So you want to periodically, when you start feeling that and becoming a distraction, uncross your legs, cross them the other way. All of a sudden, you'll feel more in balance. If you stay that way long enough, you start feeling this upper leg is now starting to give me a little resistance. It's natural for your entire legs to fall completely asleep, completely numb. That's not bad circulation, that's sensory adaptation. But you have to be very careful getting up. I got up once, my both legs were going bzz, 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 from the foot to the knee. I couldn't feel anything. And I started falling over. Matsuoka was there and caught me. It was in private meditation, what he called Dokusan. You just go and sit with him. Same way we did on Sunday, but it was just you. So he didn't believe in Dokusan that much. So any questions so far? So sitting like this on a bench or on a chair is fine. As I said, the most important part of the posture is the upper part, the back, neck, and head to be straight. But you want to make sure that your knees are below your hips, not pushing you back. So I tend to put my legs like this, akimbo, I think we call it, like your arms are akimbo, your legs are akimbo. So my knees are hanging down. I perched on the edge of the bed. There's a Christian Orthodox church of some kind that has little individual benches. They're kind of high and narrow, and the people perch on those and sit. So that's the kind of dynamic you want to find. And if you sit on one of our slapback chairs over there, they have little wedge cushion that help you sit forward and tip in the right direction. So your hips are turned downward and forward, pushing down like Aquaman's gas pedal. Your chin is pulled back, stretching the upper neck. Your knees are below your hips. You can sit anywhere. You can sit on a beach. You can sit on a rock. You could sit on the edge of a cliff if you're not terrified of heights. And Randy, you've done that. You've been out in the. We're talking about sitting in the snow.
In the Alps, yeah.
In the Alps.
Snow's great because you can wiggle and make a little seat.
Yep, and the heat melts you into the snow. Right?
As long as you've got waterproof pants on, it's okay.
Yeah. On the beach, the sand is the same thing. You wouldn't find it upslope, but sand you'd find it downslope. And that's nestled into it. So that's what I'm saying. This is the natural posture. People have sat this way for millennia, going back into the ancient prehistoric times. And that's what we're looking to find. So we're not adding anything new. We're trying to, in a sense, disabuse ourselves of everything we think about and conceptualize about Zazen. Just returning to the original posture, returning to the natural posture. So in Soto Zen, and perhaps Rinzai, all the others, I'm not sure, we place the hands in this type of posture. Any hand posture is called mudra. This means beneficence. This means teaching. It's kind of like sign language in India. This is called the cosmic mudra. The active hand typically is on bottom, depending on which way you're crossing your legs. If your legs are hands are resting on your legs, it's actually more comfortable to alter your hand position the same way because your heel will get in the way of one hand. But typically the active hand goes on bottom. So the fingers of the upper hand nest in the palm of the lower hand. The middle knuckle of the middle finger pretty much exactly overlaps. And we touch the thumbs slightly at the tip and raise them to form symmetric looping. Nothing magical about it. It's called cosmic mudra. Master Dogen said, put your hand right here in the palm of your mind. Put your mind right here in the palm of your hand. Sit as if you're holding a precious gem. Sometimes this ellipse is referred to as a gem-like shape. So part of our practice is attitude adjustment, developing attitudes, relinquishing attitudes we may have going in. One of our members is a poet. She lives in Texas now. She was, or rather Arizona, she was in Texas. And she read my first book and she said it inspired her to start practicing again. She had become distressed with a Zen teacher who had crossed some boundaries and dropped out for many, many years. So she wrote me a nice letter and we struck up a relationship conversation online. And he wrote a poem called Waiting Room Zen. She had a bad ankle. She had to go to a doctor or clinic. She was sitting in the doctor's waiting room. Lots of people were there reading their books and on their social media devices. She was just looking around and she said, suddenly I just sank into Zazen. The poem goes on like that very quickly. And the last words in the poem are something like, and finally they called my name too soon. Oh, this can happen anywhere. You can be sitting in a train station. You can be, there are ways to do meditation standing, waiting in line, so on. So the way it comes over into our life, I think, is mostly through motor muscle memory. That is, if you're in a touchy situation, a stressful board meeting, some kind of bad boss syndrome, or just having a task that you have to complete and a lot of pressure. If you find your body sitting up straighter, sort of automatically or on its own, you find yourself breathing deeper, find yourself pulling your chin in, gaze dropping downward to the boardroom table, not anxiously looking at everybody else in the boardroom, then you could say the Zen is working. Your body is recalling what it was like in the Zendo when you were not under stress, not under this kind of stress. And the same can be said of driving. If you're in a traffic jam, or if you're in a hurry to get to work and all that kind of stress, you don't want to zone out at 60 miles an hour, but you can certainly sit up straighter. You can adjust the back of your seat so you're not leaning or lying down, unless you're in a Maserati or something where you can't sit up straight. And then pulling back on the chin and staying aware both of inside the vehicle and outside the vehicle. You're both on the road and you're in the car simultaneously, and you can become much more alert to things happening around you and safer in that sense, and more patient. Most of us get into trouble because we lose patience. So the Sharingama Sutra is highly recommended. And there's a wonderful free downloadable translation, which I can send to you if you send me an email, by the BDK translation group. PJ Jones in Birmingham and I have been going through it, and we're about 2/3 of the way through, and it's just hitting the part of the where Buddha starts talking about an analog or metaphor for the mind and the senses and how they work. And he talks about the effectiveness of the senses. So the posture includes fixed gaze. The posture includes attention to the posture, attention to the posture, attention to the breathing, attention to the senses. The Heart Sutra right up front says, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, attributed to Buddha. So why would he bring the senses right up front like that? It's because that's where Zen is telling you to put your attention. If we sit with our eyes closed, we cut vision out entirely, like mindfulness meditation. And it's just thinking about thoughts, so forth. So with our eyes open, we turn our attention to our eyes, seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, tasting, and so forth. Thinking is now like 1 out of 6 instead of dominant. So the effectiveness that Buddha points out, he says that vision and hearing are much more effective in terms of seeing past the senses, seeing into the stillness, unraveling the senses as knots in a silk scarf, is his metaphor that he was using. Because they're not directly in contact, body tactility, sensation is directly in contact and more dependent upon its objects. So if it's hot, you're feeling the heat. If it's cold, you're feeling the cold. If it's friction, you're feeling that. If it's gravity, pressure, you're feeling that. You don't have much recourse other than if you sit still enough long enough, that will start to adapt. So the pressure on your butt will become numb. You would turn numb and it would start neutralizing out. But it takes a long time. Whereas with seeing and hearing, and again, smelling and tasting are chemical. They're in contact with the constituents in the air, constituents in whatever you eat, so forth. So he isolated, he had like a ratings chart of 1,200 points, and he arrives at this through some multiplication, which is very interesting for the time. So he's rating the senses in terms of their effectiveness, so forth. But he's ranking seeing and hearing the highest of all. Seeing is the highest vision, and then hearing just behind it, because they have no immediate contact with their objects. And of course, we know different now. We know physics. We know photons are hitting the retina, the eyeball. We know sound waves in the air are hitting the eardrum and so forth. But they didn't have that science in those times. So all he could refer to was what they were familiar with, which is obviously seeing and hearing are not impacted unless you have an extremely bright light, all of a sudden an explosion, loud noise, by the contact with the object of the sense. Each sense is tripartite. It's the organ, the object, and the field in which it transpires. So vision is transpiring in the field of light, very high on the magnetic spectrum, electromagnetic spectrum, and hearing is lower, but it's in compression of air waves and water waves, compression of molecules, essentially, I suppose. So then when you get to smelling and tasting, it's direct contact with chemistry, and tactility, it's direct contact with gravity, surface friction, et cetera, et cetera. So that's his model, a wonderful way, kind of science of the times way of talking to his students about it. So he was suggesting that they put most of their attention into seeing and hearing while they're sitting. Right. In my model, in the original frontier, I treat the senses as we confront them in meditation. And for most of us, we confront the tactility first. Our leg hurts, our back hurts, something hurts. We're not comfortable sitting this way. So in order of level of difficulty or level of resistance, body, I think, definitely for most people comes first. If you're extremely healthy, very athletic, we've had basketball players, football players come in here. They can't stand it. They're just blown away by how painful it is right away. Of course, they're huge and muscular. And so if you think about running, jogging, and being in the zone, that's the least effective sense, according to Buddha. If you sit still enough, straight enough, long enough, and tune in to seeing and hearing, those are the most effective senses to approach the unraveling of your mind, or the delusional aspect of mind. Randy, I know you're working on delusion and AI. There's some very interesting things on delusion in that chapter. You got to read. See. Yeah, and right, we're about 2/3 of the way through this. The one that has to do with untying the senses by His point is you unravel. Six senses are like knots tied in a scarf. This is the metaphor he uses. You can't untie them all simultaneously. You have to start with one. And so, which are the most easy of access, easiest to effectively unravel? And he's making the point of seeing, hearing, neck. And most of the disciples testify that hearing is the one that unraveled for them first through deep listening. Avalokiteshvara represented on the altar, so-called Bodhisattva of compassion. Avalokiteshvara Kanon, Kanzeon, Kanjizai, these different names in Japanese. Kanon mean like the all-seeing, all-hearing one, who came to full enlightenment through hearing the sounds of suffering of the world. So even though we're sitting with body and we're dealing with resistance in the body, mostly in the beginning, we're turning our attention to these senses that are more amenable, seeing and hearing. That's where we're paying the most attention, according to Buddha's teaching in the Sharing Mala. Okay, we're at 7:30 now, so let's break for a moment, take a stretch, and we'll find a place around the hall to sit facing a blank wall, preferably. Any questions first? No.
What's the name of the temple you mentioned? What was the name of the super you mentioned?
Sheradan, Suran, Gama, Gama. It means something like Path of the Warrior, something like that. I got a free BDK translation I'll send to you. Wonderful commentary by a Chinese teacher.
What was the phrase where you said that Matsuoka said is the right zazen?
Real. He said that when posture, breath, and attention all come together in a unified way, this is the real zazen. So, there's this subtle admonition that you can spend your whole life thinking you're doing zazen when you're not, going through the motions that you're getting in your way or you're interested in. Questions, Dean, so far? Yeah, I know it's a lot, it's a dose.
I don't really want to take the opportunity to approach this with beginner's mind, so to speak. I will say that I have a lot less flexibility than I used to with my age and my back surgery and disc problems in my neck, but
Welcome to the
make my
club.
best effort to be supple to corrections.
Yes, yes. And I'll come around and adjust your posture a little bit, but don't hesitate to sit on a chair. Don't put yourself through any needless agony. It's just, it doesn't work. It's not effective. You need to become still. As you become still, you can't be fighting pain and, macho Zen BS. So find a place facing the wall. Blank wall is preferable. We'll adjust the light level, and then I'll burn a stick of incense. Nobody. Okay.
Long air spots.
Actually, those are fine. You're looking downward 30, 45 degrees anyway. Now I do a brief facial, which is a pointed talk. Pawns are the while you are
Cross-legged and say cross-legged and say that. I've seen that before. Yes.
We'll go through the checkpoints on our posture. We'll sit down. The walking motion is recommended just to check to make sure that you are centered. You may be a little to one side or the other, forward or back, without being able to feel it. And the rocking motion lets you feel the being off-bound, off-centered, and off-centered the other way till you come back to middle. So it's like Nagarjuna's doctrine of the mean. You have to go beyond, you have to go to the extreme before you can correct back to the middle. Like playing a guitar string. Tighten it a little above the pitch, loosen it a little below the pitch, and back up to the pitch until you land in the middle. Once you're comfortable, you turn our attention to the vision, hearing. Typically, ambient sound, ambient light, kept at a bright level, but bright in Dogen's time meant candlelight. Typically, no one is allowed to speak. The abbot, the guiding teacher, can take liberties with that, giving what is called a teisho. Teisho is a spontaneous expression of their understanding of Zen, some point about meditation, something they feel at that moment urgent, or something has just popped up in their mind, at least. They want to share that with their student. Teisho is usually a surprise. You just hear somebody say something all of a sudden, it's shocking. Well, this is not exactly Teisho in that sense. But I want to point you to your vision by having you close your eyes and do a little bit of the rocking motion. See if you can feel that upright point in the posture. Tanden is at the base where the pendulum swings. It's like the mount of the pendulum is the tanden. And when you become still, you're sort of resting on that point. It said when you settle on that point and you touch it, it's as if you're immersed in a field of energy. So you may feel a floating sensation. You may feel a frisson of energy rising through your spine, different kinds of body sensations, all perfectly natural. Dr. Dogen said we enter the fine mind of nirvana, the subtle mind of nirvana. So motion and stillness become mukharai, stillness in motion, motion in stillness. Silence is in the sound, sound is in the silence. And walking a little bit with your eyes closed and gradually let them open, you will notice that you're looking downward 30, 45 degrees. The gaze becomes fixed on a point in space, not focused on the wall, as if you're looking through the wall. The wall is just another object floating in your field of vision. Buddha taught that if you, again, Sharingan Sutra, if you take away the walls, take away the surrounding trees and hills and mountains, you will see as far away as the moon and the sun and the stars. So the faculty of vision is not limited by the sense organ of vision. Faculty of vision is in the mind. Even the blind see the darkness. Faculty of hearing is not in the organ. Even the deaf hear the silence. So the senses are not limited by their objects. Fixed gaze is critical to sinking into deep stillness. As the body becomes still, becomes calm, we begin to feel, you could say, a different scale, a different level of motion. Motion in stillness, stillness in motion, on a fine or subtle scale. Same with hearing, same with feeling. So look into your vision, fixed gaze, listen deeply into your hearing. So we can report out a little on our experience for that. Does anybody really want tea? Should we make tea? Who's a good tea maker? I don't even know where tea is. I don't need tea. I don't need tea. I don't. So what if I were to tell you that I paid them $100 to run that train by here at exactly that time tonight?
Well, I would ask you if it all cost $100.
I know the guy. I got a guy for that. I know a guy for that. There was an incident at Candler Park. I'm not sure you were there, John. But one Sunday we're sitting there and it was hot summer. So front of the wall, the room was about us from that far post to this corner. So it was about this big. We had these transom windows at the front and we opened those in the summer. So you hear everything on the street. It was Sunday, so it's quiet. But then the building was connected to a house, and two guys that lived in the house came out, and you hear the door closing, their feet on the porch and coming down the stairs, and they had a pickup truck parked right there, and the asphalt in front of the Zen Center. And they're talking about what they're doing. They're going fishing or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they get in the truck and slam the doors and drive off, and you hear them going down the road, sound disappearing. So it was like a perfect little theatrical set. Everybody's sitting there listening to this. So afterwards, I asked him, "What would you say if I told you I hired a couple of actors?"
I recollect you telling me one time, and maybe others in the Sangha, that when you're engaged with thoughts, to regard them as train cars passing by. You can't make them stop. You can't grasp them. You just observe them passing by, and then the next, and so on.
We used to love to watch the trains and try to get the engineer to pull the horn. We had a dog that would chase and bite at the wheels. Idiot dog. He never caught one, fortunately. So, questions or report out on your experience tonight? Dark Shadows. Are you familiar with the book In Praise of Shadows? Praise of Shadow by a Japanese writer, and he makes the point that most of the aesthetics in Japan, like the lacquer bowls and all of these things, were designed in candlelight and oil lamp light. They weren't designed in fluorescent. So they don't have their beauty in modern lighting. It's only when they're in shadow that the way they designed them, made them. So In Praise of Shadow, wonderful book. It's more like a design architecture book. It's Japanese. Soap opera. Same thing. Oh, welcome. Any comment? Question?
It's interesting. I've been to the other four classes, but this one
Oh, you missed posture.
to hit this last. I do find that despite the fact that we're supposed to keep our eyes open and that letting this group a little bit quiet the noise.
Mm-hmm. Looking downward, if you notice the iconography, the statues, the paintings, they all have that sort of draped eyelid, looking down, Mona Lisa type face, very peaceful, calm. And it's the face at rest. They claim it takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile. If your face is completely at rest, it's a slight smile. You see the old guys in China with mouth curved down. They're opening their nostrils for breathing. If you pull down hard on your corners of your mouth, it opens up your nasal passages. Called the Zen smile. It's a frown. Plus, it's
Funny when you said, "What if I told you I paid that train?" I thought, "What train?" You know,
like the Zen is working.
hadn't noticed it.
It, there's a wonderful line in the 108 Gates of Dharma Illumination that we chant New Year's Eve. We ring the bell with each one. That's 108 till midnight. And one of them says something like, uh, hearing is the gate of Dharma illumination, for with it, and they're all sort of formatted this way, hearing is a gate of Dharma illumination, for with it, we realize that speech, something, something, something are all just sound.
Um, yeah, pardon. Here we grew semi-industrial environment, on whatever day of the week it is. Mornings I was in near the dumpsters collecting the trash, the truck. And I was here for a retreat one time years ago when they were doing the remediation on the soil here, and you hear the beep, 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 truck backing up, and
Sounds like War of the Worlds.
dropping the dirt in. And then you go to watershed, and there's the creek and the birds, and wow, it's all the same.
Yeah, just sound. So that's why we say, even though I'm ignorant and what I am saying is inaccurate, still my talking is the Dharma. The fact that I'm speaking or you're hearing or you're speaking, that is the Dharma. That's expressing the Dharma, even though the words are incorrect. So,
I did notice the train. Thought it was really soothing.
so it's
Soothing.
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 Yeah, I've always loved the sound of trains. It
Yeah.
brings me to my childhood.
One thing I wanted to ask about is I always find when I do this, especially if my back is particular, if I try to do like what we were talking about with the gas pedal, I find that my hands naturally do this.
Yeah.
Is it just a matter of just making sure that they stay?
And your legs are trying to do this, they're trying to fall apart. So we do one of the segments, we do Zen bondage. I bring in ties and things, you tie them around your legs and tie yourself in place, so you can't move. Or you take a blanket and pull it over your shoulders and tie it up so you're like in a sling. Yeah.
Mm.
You can experiment with things like that and you can see where that tendency is coming from, especially the legs. They're trying to relax, they're trying to slide apart. One thing an experiment you can do, you can do this when you're lying down to sleep if you're having trouble sleeping. Try pushing your head into the pillow as hard as you can. Push, 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 push. And then pull your head up until you feel like you're actually lifting your head. See if you can find the middle where you're neither pushing it in nor are you lifting it up. That's the actual weight of your head. Same thing with your hands. Try this. So push down hard as you can on your legs. So you're making your arms very, very heavy, right? You're pushing, pushing, pushing down. And then pull up on it, let up on it. Keep coming up until you feel like you're lifting them off of your legs. And again, push down hard. And then relax. See if you can find where they're just floating in the middle. You're not pushing them down and you're not lifting them up. So you can apply that to every part of your body. The harmony with gravity. Where are you really? Sensei came along one time in Chicago, and I've been sitting a couple of years, I think. He just reached up and put his finger under the bone on your skull. It sticks out in the back there, and he just pushed my head up about an inch. And that was exactly what was missing. And there was another time I was there, I'd been sitting again a couple of years, and I realized that holding my legs up, I just put it, I've been sitting this way for years. And suddenly, I'm holding my legs up. I said, no, it pays to check and not make assumptions. When I recommend what you can try is just interlace your fingers.
I've tried that a couple of. It feels
It's
weird.
just it's more casual, you know what I mean? It's like everybody does it. It's not special.
Mm-hmm.
And so just, you know, that way they're not going to slide. It's a whole lot more friction.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way my Seiza benches work. The slats create, there's like a square inch of friction between each of the slats.
Mm-hmm.
And it adds up to about eight or nine square inches of friction across the bench. So your fingers are like that. Your fingers are creating friction against each other. So they won't slide apart.
I guess when you do this, is the idea to like kind of grip it with your fingers, or is it just supposed to just naturally rest there?
You know, I'm not sure. It's kind of like a barometer. If your thumbs are falling into your hands, you're probably dozing off or daydreaming or something. If you're pressing hard, you're probably under a lot of tension, you know. So you kind of, they say, float a dollar bill between your thumbs. It'll stay there, but somebody could easily pull it out. It's like just minimal friction. Sewing teacher in Austin said she thought that this closes a circuit related to the chakras. Closes like an energy circuit.
I get like a electric sensation when I put my fingers that close. It's kind of like
It's a tingling, prickly feeling. That's called ki in Zen. The Nakan Tanden exercise we do, where you're lying down to sleep and you're breathing down through your legs and so forth. Have you been through that with?
I think so.
Um, it was Hawkwind, and he said when you start feeling quickly pins and needles, you know, feeling in your fingers and toes, your extremities. That's when it's working. He said the key of the body is now drawing the key in from the universal key into the body through the breathing. And you feel it in your extremities, your fingers and toes start to tingle like pins and needles. And of course, science today, we would explain that away differently as the circulation is probably improving and picking up in if you're cold and you do certain exercises, you direct more blood to your fingers and toes and they start burning sensation, pleasant sensation. So I didn't come around to correct posture, so you didn't have to make yourself subtle to that correction.
I'm sorry.
I said I did not come around to correct posture, so you did not have to make yourself subtle to the corrections.
No, right.
I lied.
I did have the urge to request
The stick?
and I kept thinking, okay, if I can get through this next count of 10, bell rings, I won't do it. But I got through the next count of 10 and put my hands up in Gasho and the bell rang. And I didn't even know if it was kosher to request stick during.
It is. I may not have seen it because it's dark enough.
I was taking your guidance to heart in terms of the posture and um, trying to kind of exaggerate the curvature of the spine and the curvature of the neck. You've probably heard of metal memory. If you take a piece of metal and bend it, you know, like a quarter of an inch, it's going to remember where it was and come back.
Trying to bend back.
So you want to bend it past where you want it to end up.
Yep.
So maybe 3/8 of an inch, and it'll come back to a quarter.
Right.
So I was figuring maybe if I can exaggerate this
Yes.
a little bit, maybe I will settle into a natural form. But it was definitely more stress than I usually put on myself, but I was.
You don't want to re-traumatize the area.
Sorry?
You don't want to re-traumatize the area, obviously. You don't want to.
Oh no,
You don't want to
no,
go
I was
too
not
far.
doing anything that was traumatizing. It was just, it was just effort, not pain.
Yeah.
I'm glad that Daniel brought up the, the question regarding the mudra, because I do want to ask you about that in terms of the position of the mudra. You emphasize letting it rest where it rests,
But yeah, the wrist nest against the hip socket there.
and of course,
There's
you know,
no
my
there's
hip
no
pocket,
strain on the arms.
I don't have the advantage of sitting in full lotus or anything. I was told by another teacher that my hands were tending to gravitate too low,
Mhm.
and that my thumbs should be like just close to my navel.
Well, you
Yeah.
might want to try a hand cushion.
That's what she recommended.
Usually when I sit, I say this cushion here. We had a guy in Wichita who had very long waisted, short arms. His hands literally could not reach to rest on his thighs or his hip socket. So I recommended he get a fanny pack and swing it around so it's here and he could rest his hands on his fanny pack.
Yeah, if I hold my mudra as this teacher told me, I feel like I'm, you know, putting a lot of tension on my arms and shoulders. So
Just want to do the shoulder rolls, raise them, drop them with their own, flap your elbows out to the side. Matsuoka Roshi said your arms should be far enough from your side that you could float a chicken egg there between your arm and your side. So I heard Barbara Cohen say that for Kinhan, and I said that had nothing to do with Kinhan. But you know, we don't want to fight between teachers here. The method is think of this. You know, think of Buddha had to be taught an asana, a yogic asana posture meditation. You know, and it's been handed down through India, China, Japan, Korea. But there has to be a basic way of sitting cross-legged, sitting for long periods of time without losing alertness, so that you can pay attention to what happens and so forth. So if you approach it on that sort of primordial level, you can see that all of these details are well intentioned, you know, but they are not critical. How could it make a difference whether you hold your hands that way or that way? I mean, you know, how could it make that big a difference if you let your chin hang out? So they're optimizing it. All the fine details are optimizing it. They're increasing the centralization. They're increasing samadhi of centralization in gravity. They're increasing the possibility that you will enter equipoise or equilibrium.
It certainly felt more like that to me when I was still able to sit Burmese. I've never been able to sit in anything approaching lotus, but when I could sit in Burmese, I felt
That's
very rooted and I could sit
triangular, very stable.
forever.
Yeah, yeah. And again, the cross-legged postures are not critical. They're nice if you can do it, you know, without becoming a distraction. In Japan, women traditionally sat in the seiza posture because they wear kimonos. You literally cannot cross your legs in a kimono. But and the men, monks in particular, but anybody chanting, performing sutra service, they kneel, seiza. They don't sit cross-legged while they're doing service.
Right.
So, but they're smaller than we are typically, smaller legs, less muscle mass, you know, getting in the way. So I think you want to contextualize all of these things and reinvent it for yourself. Remember the basics. You know, you're coming into alignment with gravity. You want to be the most comfortable possible, the most stable. They say don't even sit where there's a breeze. So if even a breeze is too much of a distraction, and it gives you a clue as to where you're trying to go with this. It's not sensory deprivation, but as Shinjin Mike Coleman often says, the closest thing they had to sensory deprivation, sitting still in a cave. Well, the stillness is what makes it work. In stillness, mind and object merge in realization, go beyond enlightenment, dogi. So you can, a legitimate question you can pose to yourself is my mind and its object merging or not? Do I see any evidence of what Dogen is pointing at? Which is what Bill Pine said, Red Pine, Bill Porter said in the Zen teachings of Bodhidharma. That was it. But in those days, when they do what we call zazen or sitting meditation, they call it analysis. They were something like analysis. He's a translator to Chinese. And he said what they were doing is they were comparing their direct experience to the teachings that they had learned to see if there's any direct evidence of those teachings. But what they call practice, we call Zazen practice. This is our practice. Practice was observing in themselves and in others in everyday life how closely they were adhering to the precepts and that level of the social teachings of Buddhism. So, they were witnessing their behavior, your behavior, the exchange, So it was a way of training you in Sangha or community. That's what they call practice. Practice was taken into daily life. How about you, Nate?
My eyes just burned for most of the time.
You what?
My eyes just burned for most of the time.
Hmm. Do you have eye drops you can put in? Do you do that? Hmm. I wonder if there's anything.
Started in one
Oh, do
eye.
you think the incense was bothering you?
I don't know.
If you sit over here, the reason I turn the fans on is I've noticed when we have lighting, you can see the smoke from the incense drifts right over to that window. And I think the reason is the sun is hitting that window. And so it's creating heat and there's an updraft just inside the window. So the smoke was pulled to that updraft and you see it go over there and go up and go across the ceiling.
Except that I was sitting on the other side of the room.
So if you're sitting over there, it would be, but you're all the way over there.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with rubbing your eyes.
I tried that, and then they started tearing up, and then it got into my nose, and my whole head just like, I don't know.
Sinus maybe, pollen. As a kid, I was taught to pull on one eyelid, pull it out, so it's off the eye, and then rub the other eye. That'll make this eye tear. Pull this one and rub this one.
I don't know. It was weird.
I had what when we were kids they called sinusitis in the morning. I get this brain drain going on. And Pearl was here, the Vietnamese nun, the first one that stayed here as a resident. She was terrible sinusitis. She'd come in just be sitting and blowing her nose and snorting.
That's what I remember the most.
Well,
Kind of passed.
does that
Closed
happen?
my eyes for
Does
a
that
while.
happen at home?
I closed my eyes for a while and focused on hearing, and then
Yeah.
and then I opened them and it was a little better, and then it started flaring up again. I just kind of was in and out of eyes open and eyes closed.
Do you experience that everywhere or just here?
That's the first time. Well, no, that's not true. I've experienced that here before, but not like that.
You might see an eye doctor. Just get it checked out. They call it a condition called dry eye. My mother-in-law had Sjogren's disease, where your eyes don't, everything is very dry mouth, dry eyes, and your body has a hard time generating liquid. Sjogren. Always something. So good. We're good. About 8:25. Close with the hold on. Beings are numberless. I vow to freedom. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Karmic gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize beings are numberless. I vow to freedom. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize that beings are numberless. I vow to freedom. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Thank you for your attendance.